Hi, I'm Monica DeWitt. I'm Education Specialist at Community Resource Center, and I'm here with Andrew Barton of the Colorado Common Cause to talk about citizens initiatives today, how they get on the ballot, questions to ask before signing or voting for them, and ways to get involved in causes that you are passionate about. CRC's Meet the Moment series was created to bring our values of stewardship, community, collaboration to life. We acknowledge that roles and responsibilities of Colorado's nonprofit sector continue to be challenged and tested, and hope that these time-relevant conversations are helpful to you and your mission. So, Andrew, thank you for joining us for Meeting the Moment to talk about citizens initiatives. I'll turn it over to you for introductions.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm Andrew. I'm the program manager for Colorado Common Cause. We do a lot of work around pro-democracy access policy and organizing and advocacy. And so making sure that folks have access to the ballot box and know all they can about the civic and democratic process here in Colorado.
Fantastic. I know we use your resources a lot for our civic engagement work. And so before we dive too deep into citizens initiatives and the details, want to define what we mean by like this moment right here in front of us. It is end of May 2026, and getting ready for midterm elections in Colorado. And petitioners are out there collecting signatures, and their deadline is coming up, I believe, around mid-July. Is that correct, Andrew?
Yeah.
Yep. And so just knowing that this is the time that folks are out with those clipboards, hey, do you have a minute? Um, and we also want to acknowledge that there's a lot of misinformation going on around out there. So we felt like this topic was really relevant to help us think about what kind of questions we should ask before putting our name to something. So without further ado, Andrew, if you would just take us a few steps back and explain what a citizens initiative is and the different types of ballot measures that we might see on our ballots in November.
Yeah, so we have in Colorado two different types of initiatives. We have the first being the referred initiative, which are ballot questions that have been put on the ballot by the state legislature. So they have the power to vote directly to place ballots or questions on the ballot for all Colorado voters to decide on. And these are statewide questions, usually dealing with things like tax changes or funding various programs. The second is the citizen initiative, and so these are policies that any Coloradan can bring forward to put on the ballot, kind of at any level too. And so we see questions at the city level, the local level, county, and statewide. And so these can look like things around creating term limits for city councilors or funding mental health programs for your county or statewide measures like allowing wine to be sold in Colorado grocery stores. And so citizen initiatives are ones, as the name suggests, that are brought by Colorado residents. And so these can be on kind of any policy, and often the ones that we see proposed are on every kind of policy that you can think of, from election timing to tax changes to environmental and climate policies, transportation. But yeah, so we expect to see a whole mess of those policies, top to bottom in Colorado, this coming election.
So it sounds like Colorado voters have a lot of power. They have power
Yeah.
over who their elected officials are, but also get to make decisions around specific issues as well. So curious about what the process is like for getting a citizens initiative on the ballot in Colorado.
Yeah, so we are one of, I believe, 16 states that have the kind of direct citizen initiative process. And so, first, as a bit of a caveat, the exact process looks different depending on where in Colorado you live and whether you're looking to run a city, county, or state initiative. So, for viewers out there who are looking to run an initiative, double check your local laws and policies around that. But kind of regardless of where you live and the scope of the initiative you're looking to run. The process for getting a citizen initiative on the ballot is is more complicated and has a number of additional steps compared to the referred initiative. So, firstly, anyone with an idea, and it really can be anyone, needs to kind of figure out what the language that they want to put forward is. And so writing it down, creating that draft of what the change to our laws you envision should be. And this doesn't need to be like a whole legal thesis. In fact, because this is the language that voters end up seeing on their ballot, it's usually better to keep it simple, clean, and understandable for folks. And so once that language has kind of been decided, then you want to file the measure for review with the relevant government department. So this can be the city clerk or the county clerk where you live, or if it's a state policy, the Office of Legislative Counsel. And so this is basically just where some legal and policy staff read over the initiative language that you submitted, make sure the language matches what you're trying to do, and then decide whether the initiative you've put forward is something that's kind of within the confines of city or county or state authority to place on the ballot. And so for statewide initiatives, if that language is approved, it'll get sent to the title board, which is a group of folks from the Secretary of State's office and a couple other statewide representatives who are going to decide, firstly, whether the initiative has a single subject. And so for statewide measures, you can't have an initiative addressing more than one subject and trying to make a whole bunch of changes at once. And then they also decide whether if that is met, then they decide on a title for it. And so once that title has been created, then it gets put out there into the world for you to gather signatures. And the process is pretty similar for local and county measures as well. It goes through a similar review, make sure that it's all within kind of the legal framework, and then it goes out for the fun part.
Or yeah, to decide if it actually goes on the ballot. So that leads me to my next question. So when we're approached to sign a petition, what are some important questions that we should be asking? Also reflecting the list, having an idea, and it's a pretty straightforward process, but it also sounds like it takes a lot of time, energy, probably most importantly, money to get something on the ballot. So how does all of that relate to the questions that we should ask before putting our name to it?
Totally. Yeah. So, like you said, it definitely, once it gets to that signature gathering phase, takes a lot of time, a lot of manpower, money. And so for citizen initiatives to make it on the ballot, and I'll just be talking about statewide because local and county are all very different. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
for statewide policies, you need to gather a certain number of signatures within a 6-month period of time. And so the folks gathering those signatures can be anyone from paid campaign staff to just friends, family, neighbors, concerned residents who feel similarly on the proposed change. And so that exact number of signatures depends a lot on the type of initiative that's being proposed, as well as whether the size of it. So if it's a city, county, or statewide question. So for statewide measure or initiatives, we have 2 different types. There's statutory initiatives, which is just the normal change to a Colorado law. So like banning trophy hunting of big cats. That was one we saw a few years back. And for statutory initiatives, you need a number of signatures that is equal to 5% of the number of votes cast for the last Secretary of State election. And so
Very
that number
specific.
is, very, very specific. And that number fluctuates depending on the year and everything. And so there can be a bit of kind of strategic consideration about your kind of the resources you have, and if you're able to get more signatures or less in that 6-month period. But that works out to be around 125,000 or so signatures. And so those signatures for statutory changes can be from anywhere. So if you're in Fort Collins or Denver or the Colorado Springs, and you can manage to get those 125,000 signatures just from where you're at, then amazing. You've made it on the ballot. The other type of initiative is the constitutional initiative. And so this is a change to Colorado's constitution. And for that, you need 2% of all registered voters in each of Colorado's 35 state Senate districts. So also very specific, but the math works out to approximately like a similar number of 100 and some thousand signatures. But the kind of point is to have more diversity throughout the state. And so you have to make sure that is generally something, the idea at least is generally something supported by urban and rural, north, south, east, and west, plains and slopes voters. And so these also signatures, the signatures gathered from either of these can just be, as long as they are active registered voters, then it is all good.
Okay, so if it's something new, um, it's easier to collect signatures. If it's a change to the Colorado Constitution, that's when you need to make sure you've got all the districts represented. Is that right?
Yeah. So you can be either one can be like a whole new addition. And so you could like add a constitutional amendment, you
Mm,
could repeal one, you can add a new law, you can try and repeal one through either the statutory or the constitutional initiative. The only difference is kind of the permanence of it. So if it's a statutory initiative and you propose a change to Colorado state law and it passes and becomes law, that means it is then subject to the Colorado state legislature. And so our state representatives and state senators can then expand or shrink or adjust that law that was put on by the ballot. And a constitutional amendment can only be changed either through that constitutional a change at the ballot for the Constitution, or through so it has to be go through the constitutional initiative route. And so both
yeah.
of those can address kind of all types of different policies. And so there's not kind of a clump of policies that goes under one instead of the other, but different different in scope, different in permanence, and in order to pass, a statutory initiative needs just 50% plus one, so just a simple majority, whereas constitutional amendments need 55 plus 1% of the vote. So at the ballot, they need a little bit more support.
Yeah, that makes sense, and makes sense why constitutional amendments require more because it's more difficult to change. Yeah.
Right.
So bringing us back to citizens initiatives and petitions,
Yeah.
what kind of information do you think voters should be looking for to better understand like the who is behind a ballot measure? And
Yeah.
also curious, like related to that, what rights do voters have when they're interacting with those petition circulators?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as a voter, as a resident, you have kind of absolutely the right to ask any questions and dig into what it is you're being asked to sign for any level and any type of ballot measure. This is a totally optional thing. Like there's no kind of compelling you to sign. And so every year, especially in big election years like this one, there's often a whole lot of ballot measures, state, local, and all of them looking for signatures. And so, firstly, I think just kind of asking for an explanation of what it is that you're being asked to sign. Usually, this is something that the folks getting signatures will be pretty proactive on. Of do you want to sign for initiative ABC that does this or that? And they're usually pretty good about giving the kind of top line view about what this will do. But for a lot of ballot measures, especially ones that are a little bit more complicated or involved, yeah, definitely kind of asking any questions that come to mind and having that back and forth, because that's sort of the point of having of that process. And any signature gatherer from a campaign looking to get signatures for an initiative will have a copy of the actual official language of the measure as it will appear on the ballot. And so they'll always will be that opportunity to read the kind of the word for word of what it is you'll be signing. And so, since meeting the requirements for those signatures often takes a good chunk or all of that 6 month window, it's also like completely okay to not sign right away, to take any information, to read through the text, to go home, do a little bit more reading and research about the issue. And if it's something that you support and you agree with, then going back to sign, since you have a pretty good chunk of time to do that, and they'll likely be probably in the same place that you saw them last time. And so, also of note, like the signature gatherers are probably either folks who are paid to get signatures or just passionate, concerned community members, and so are probably not the like deep in the weeds policy experts on this issue. And so they'll be able to kind of help you out with the 101 of it probably, but beyond that, it is also still again helpful to do a little digging about the ins and outs if you have additional questions. And something that we've seen in the last couple elections, unfortunately, has been some instances of signature gatherers misleading or misinforming potential signers about the measure that they're advocating for. And so this is of course ethically horrible, but unfortunately there aren't very many actual laws or rules or regulations around how ballot information, especially in the signature gathering phase, is presented to folks. And so it can be super helpful, again, to if you're unsure, like in the moment, just reading through the ballot language. That's something that has kind of caught some of these instances of misleading would-be signers, of being told a ballot measure does A, but reading through the actual text, it does nothing of the sort.
Mhm.
Um, and so that is, I think, definitely just best practice to read through and know what it is you're signing. But again, it's also important to note that if you do sign, it is not a vote. That does not tie you to, does not commit you to voting should it make it to the ballot. It doesn't mean you've already voted for it. And it also doesn't mean that, so it does not kind of commit you to any action.
Mhm.
And so, like, recognizing that it's totally okay to not sign and vote in favor later, to sign, vote against later at the ballot. And I think just trying to do your due diligence about what you're signing is always best.
Yeah, and my understanding petitioners go through a pretty strict training process through the Secretary of State, but really their like bottom line rule is you're not allowed to lie. And so there is some gray
Yeah,
area in there of like you can give a general gist
right.
that maybe isn't the full picture, and that's where the thoughtful questions come in. Yeah. And we've provided a list of those of some of those thoughtful questions in the accompanying packet too. So can be helpful to look through. Um, I know at CRC, we're also working on a training called Beyond the Blue Book, just acknowledging that ballot language can be really technical and confusing.
Right.
So curious, Andrew, if you have some strategies for voters to better understand a measure before voting.
Totally. Yeah, it can be a lot, especially I think, almost every year, maybe every year, there's at least some tax policy change, the most complicated and driest kind of policy there is. I say
Can't
that
get
as
away
a
from
tax
Tabor.
nerd, but yeah. And so it can be a lot to try and just wrap your mind around what it is you're seeing.
Mhm.
And Colorado, like, we're fortunate that a lot of the language that is on the ballot does, like, we do have some guidelines around it being as trying to be as accessible and kind of the language not being too technical, but as I'm sure any voter out there knows, that doesn't always help a ton. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think best thing to do first of all is check out that blue book. Gets mailed to every voter. In it is a nonpartisan, just kind of rundown of the facts of like what does this bill do or what does the initiative do, is the kind of expected impact, and what does this mean as best they're kind of able for you as a voter. But still, in that, it is hard to kind of distill that down for someone who is not a policy nerd, someone who doesn't know the ins and outs of these issues. And so um, it is still definitely helpful to do that. But I think looking at other kind of voter guides or explainers that are out there, and there's always a lot of them, that are looking at the ones that are kind of not pushed by an initiative's own campaign, is a really good next step. And there's a number of really great ones that just break down these complex policies into more plain language without taking an official stance one way or the other. And those can be really helpful. And another kind of, if you want to take it a step further, more helpful thing is looking at who is endorsing and who is funding initiatives. That's a really great way to get a pretty good picture of where this initiative came from and potentially some of the motivations behind it. Ballot initiatives are usually run as campaigns, and so they register with Tracer, which is the Colorado Secretary of State's campaign finance tool. And it can be a little hard to navigate, but if you take any of the lit or flyers or any information that is kind of from that campaign, at the bottom in very small text will be the official name of the campaign itself. And so if you look that up in Tracer, you'll be able to see the campaign finance filings, which will show who's given money to the campaign, and that can kind of illuminate a little bit who is behind the campaign, especially initiatives being not candidates, not individual
Mhm.
people. There can be a lot of like dark money going into both for and against different initiatives, and so that can be really helpful. And in the future campaigns, we this year we saw a bill that was passed that would simplify the language itself on the ballot. And so
Mhm.
House Bill 1320 is hopefully going to make that text a lot more, just a lot easier to understand, and
Mhm.
kind of removing the technical jargon, trying to bring it down to a level that is just as widely understandable. And so hopefully that will also be a really big help in understanding some of these kind of big, long policy proposals that we're asked to vote on.
I'm glad you brought that up. One of our Root Causes Network members, CRC runs a network of direct service nonprofits and policy groups, and one of our partners who's part of the network launched that bill. So yeah,
Oh,
feeling
amazing. That's
feeling
awesome.
really proud of them.
Tanya.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and just thinking about some of those trusted sources. I know Count Me In is a great resource for sort of that like general yes and no vote kind of text, an initiative that both Common Cause and CRC are a part of.
Yeah.
And then I also really like the League of Women Voters, their ballot tools. They're really like easy to follow. And then also acknowledging like probably most of our audience is nonprofit leaders and in Colorado, I mean, I think in most states you're able to talk about what's on the ballot pretty freely, but in Colorado you're actually able to ask for assistance while voting. So that's like
Yeah.
physically with your mail-in ballot if you want someone to like help you go through in the in-person polling center. So lots of accommodations, accessibility laws in place in Colorado. So if you're a nonprofit leader and you get these questions a lot, like it's okay to go through the blue book. It's okay to kind of show people what sample ballots look like and what it might feel like to vote. Um, while not expressing your vote specifically,
Yeah.
also protecting yourself there. Um, So curious also, you mentioned that petitioners can be paid and sort of that can be their job, but also it can be volunteers. So curious if there are ways that people can get involved in ballot measure work beyond just voting yes or no.
Yeah, I think that is probably the one of the most impactful ways that folks can kind of get plugged into the initiative process. Once it's been approved for the ballot, once you're in kind of that signature gathering phase, that is where initiatives need the most support. And so if there is one out there that really speaks to you, that's on an issue that you really care about, be it state, county, or local, reaching out to the initiative campaign itself is a really great way to get involved. They always have a lot of different ways you can get involved that are really easy to kind of tailor to your schedule, your capacity, your comfort level, and kind of from knocking doors and handing out information to just making posts on social media or writing a letter to the editor in your local paper, or especially like hosting neighborhood gatherings or ballot parties of here's an issue that I care about as someone who is in community, who come learn a little bit more about it, because both in the signature phase and once it has the signatures and makes it to the ballot, it's just a lot of education, information, letting folks know that it A exists and
Hmm.
B is something worth voting one way or the other on.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, one of our CRC's interns became a notary, a public notary.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm not ready to knock on doors. I'm not ready to collect signatures, but I can like approve those signatures once they're collected. So she's really excited for like to
That's
become,
awesome.
she'll be important very soon as those
Yeah.
signatures get collected. So yeah, lots of ways to get involved. That's really cool. Um, and we also mentioned the Count Me In initiative, which is, a group of nonprofits coming together and policy groups coming together to create this nonpartisan ballot guide.
Yeah.
So again, just curious about the roles of coalitions, community organizations, and volunteers too. Like what role do we all play in ballot education and campaigns?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the meat and potatoes of the initiative process. Like community organizations, nonprofit coalitions, and just individual community voices play probably the biggest role in the life of an initiative, whether it passes or fails, whether it makes it to the ballot or doesn't. So much of it comes down to that education, and um, as this is, I think, especially the case for like community originated citizen initiatives where it didn't come from the state government, it didn't come from your city council or county commissioners board. It came from just people who care about an issue. There's just so much work that goes into informing folks about it, and I think this is again kind of where folks who are interested in supporting a measure can plug in to make a lot of really great and very tangible like impact. Um, and this isn't always necessarily a matter of this is something I support or oppose, and let me talk you into supporting or opposing it too. That can definitely be a part of it, and if that is your passion, then there's absolutely a role for that for sure. But ballots are long, and ballot measures come after all the candidates, and so when
Mhm.
a voter is spent the last 3 days researching all the candidates and voting for the person that they support. Seeing that you've got like 3 more pages of ballot measures can be a lot and can be really overwhelming. And so, a lot of the work that kind of needs to happen in these initiative campaigns is just letting folks know that this measure again exists and that it's something worth engaging with, and that's can be kind of to your whole city, knocking doors, but also just to your friends, your family, your neighbors, your book club, and a lot of it is just kind of getting over the potential for like voter fatigue, making sure that folks know that they're not alone in filling out all of these, like taking a stance on these things that, like, I don't know anything about uh, environmental, like water policy or something that's on the ballot. Um, so I'm like, maybe I should just not fill it out. But creating that sense of community, creating the support to be like, just you don't have to be a policy expert. This is just what do you, as a Colorado voter, want and think is best. Um,
Hmm.
and so I think that is kind of the most valuable thing is bringing neighbors together, bringing your book club together, bringing your HOA together for even just like a little ballot party to come together, talk about what these things might mean, and um, have that conversation.
Yeah. And again, putting another plug for Count Me In. Count Me In also
Yes.
will like come and do a presentation at your book club, your HOA meeting. Like, doesn't matter how big or small. The group within capacity is excited to do presentations anywhere, everywhere and anywhere. Um, Oh, I love, and again, just acknowledging we're kind of like shifting back and forth between like you as an individual voter and then also like as a and as a nonprofit entity and as a leader in the nonprofit sector. And so at the very bottom of the packet, I've also included some resources around lobbying limits for nonprofits. And so just important if there's a cause or a ballot measure that's coming that is directly related to your mission that you feel like you want to take a stance on, just making sure that you're doing that responsibly and within your limits. And that's something that CRC is happy to help support folks with as well. Andrew, this has really been lovely and so informative. How can listeners contact you and learn more about Colorado Common Cause?
Yeah, we would love to hear from folks and work together. We're doing a lot of building for the upcoming election, getting folks out to vote, protecting access to the ballot box. So if folks want to reach out via email, my email is abarton, abarton at commoncause.org. Or you can also contact us and just learn more about what Colorado Common Cause does at commoncause.org/Colorado.
Great. Thanks so much.
Amazing. Thank you.